Hi everybody, welcome to beautiful Priest Lake, Idaho. I woke up really early this morning and I just had a lot of thoughts on my mind and I decided to come down here and share them with you. And I'm going to probably record this in two parts because I have a lot to say. The first part here I'm going to tell a little bit more about my history of me growing up and then what the connection is to this place. And then also because it's relevant to a lot of the parts of the message that I have that will come next. So first of all, my mom and dad are, my dad was from California and my mom is from Seattle, Washington, and they both met at a college in Eastern Washington called Walla Walla College. At the time, it's now university. And they went to that school because they were Seventh-day Adventists. That's the religious background that I come from. And the Adventist culture and religion is steeped very strongly in education. It was always, from back into their early founding days in the 1840s and on, that their focus was education, and so they started schools. And from elementary all the way through high school and then college, it was very traditional that Adventist kids go to Adventist schools so that they could find Adventist husbands and wives in order to retain, the ongoing tradition of Adventism. And I am telling you this because it is very relevant to some of the messages that have come through to me. So anyway, that's where they met. And then my dad was a physics. He had a double major in math and physics, and actually also theology. He had a triple major. So he wanted to teach school. In fact, the reason he went into physics was because when he was a kid, he just was one of those kids that's just very thirsty for knowledge and information on everything. And his stepdad would always get frustrated with him finally and say to him, because little Jim would ask all kinds of questions about this and that and the other thing, and finally he would just say, I don't know, ask a physicist, because so many of the questions that he had to do with the physical world in which he lived. And I now know that his thirst for information and knowledge about this world really goes back to his prior life. I was told, and this really resonates with me, that my dad and I are very, very close soulmates, going back to our origins in the Pleiades. And as he came to this earth to really prepare the way for me to come in and the work that I am to do, he had a lot of curiosity. And so, just kind of an innate knowledge and for developing those skills and that knowledge in this realm. So anyway, back to him and my mom. They met and got married, and then they went, his first job teaching in an Adventist school, high school, was out in Tennessee. And he was only there 1 year when he got a call to come back to the inland Pacific Northwest, and it was to a little Adventist boarding school, a high school academy they call it, and to teach physics and math and whatnot there at this little school just south of Spokane. So Spokane, Washington is where I live now. So it was that in 1972 I was born in Spokane, and my parents had already been living in the area for about 5 years, I think, or more. And when I was a baby, every single summer, because my dad had the summers off, we would come up here and camp, and we'd actually camp at, this is an island right here, and just past it, you can't quite see that way, there's another little island out there that's where we would camp every summer. And I remember it really, really well, not only because we had family movies of it, but because I just do. I've always been that kind of child. I remember being in my crib. I remember before I was potty trained, and I was potty trained by the time I was 2. And this one memory that I have, I was sitting in a little dish tub, like this big. It's what you wash dishes in when you're camping. And I was sitting in it, and my legs were stretched out all the way across, so I couldn't have been more than a year old. And I remember just splashing in the water and just looking at my feet, sitting in this little tub, and just knowing that I was at Priest Lake. Or, knowing and having an awareness of where I was. It was set up on the picnic table when my mom was giving me a bath, and I had awareness of where I was, and I remember that. And so this place has always had very, special memories to me because I grew up going camping here, but we moved away when I was 3. So when I was 3, we moved to Billings, Montana, and we lived there until I was 11. And then what my dad had done at that point was he decided to leave teaching to become a pastor. So we pastored a church, actually many churches in Montana. And we grew up from that point on where we were never around lakes, which I know now is something that's just, I need to be by water, and especially fresh lakes. I love the ocean, but I would take a place like this over the ocean a million times over, but that's just me. Anyway, didn't get to grow up around lakes much. At that point, although we'd go back to my grandmother's, she lived in Seattle, lived on Lake Washington, and I always just loved going to my grandmother's. My grandmother is the one that, when you see spirit orbs, that's who she is. We moved back east when I was 11 because my dad decided to become what they call an evangelist, a traveling preacher. So we moved out of our 5-bedroom home into a 45-foot fifth wheel, and my sister and I were homeschooling, and we traveled all the time. So we'd go to a church and we'd have a series of meetings that would last for a month, in which my dad would preach all about the Adventist doctrine from the Bible, and I would, sit in those meetings. It was an hour or more every evening, 5 nights a week, and twice on Saturdays because we went to church on Saturdays. So I grew up steeped in religion and the Bible. Memorizing Bible texts. All of our schooling was always centered around the Bible, and it was amazing. A very different life. So even compared to most Adventist kids, I lived a very, very, very different life. Very sheltered. My parents were super, super conservative, but in spite of all that, they always had what I know absolutely without a doubt, and it still is exhibited to me, unconditional love. And it was an interesting juxtaposition, because when you unconditionally love somebody, and yet you have a religion with all of these beliefs that gives you so much fear. There's a lot of fear in it, because there's like this long list of all these things that you have to do in order to be saved. And Adventists don't teach like a lot of other Christians do, that basically if you just believe in Jesus you're saved. Adventists say that, but they have so many ifs, ands, or buts afterward that you just grow up with this constant, at least I did, I grew up with this feeling like I'll never be saved, I can never know that I'm saved, and just, it was terrible, a lot of fear. So it's interesting to grow up in a situation where there's unconditional love mixed in with so much fear, and so much like it's just pounded into your mind that Adventists we are the ones that know what the Bible really teaches, and all the other Christians, they don't even understand the Bible like they should. And not that they'll be lost because, they didn't really know, but if they ever were able to find out the truth and then they rejected the truth, like if they, started going to an Adventist church and then they reject it later on, then they will be lost. And so that's really where my parents, they still have such a struggle with me right now, because they love me so much. They don't want me to be eternally lost, and their only hope in their mind really is that somehow just before I die, that I'll have an opportunity to confess and repent and realize that actually the Adventist teaching is correct. So that's just some of the history there about the belief system I grew up in. We'll fast forward quite a ways, even past the time where I met my twin by being forced by my parents to go to this super tiny conservative Adventist college. And the year before, I'd gone to Walla Walla, which was a big Adventist college, which is, kind of like a more normal thing for Adventist kids to do. But that wasn't good enough. I'd started going to movies. That was the one thing I did that, was bad. And they were worried for my salvation, so they made me go to Weimar College. And I remember that summer, all summer long, just being so, like, knowing that I really wanted to go to Walla Walla, but it was always up in the air. And not knowing until the very end of the summer what my parents would decide. And because I was dependent on them for education, and I was only 18, when they finally said, we've just really prayed about this, and we just feel so strongly you must go to Weimar this 1 year. Just go 1 year, and after that, we'll let you go wherever you want, provided it's an Adventist college. And I now look back on that, and I'm like, that's why, I know the universe put it in their hearts, make her go. She's got to go to Weimar. That's where she's going to meet her twin, So, and it was interesting because that was also, if you did read or listen to my earlier stories, that's where I met him, and he was only there for 2 quarters. He's from back east, and so, the reason that he ended up being there was very strange as well. He was 18 years old, and he was already a flight instructor, his pilot's license and his instructor's license. And so Weimar, little tiny college that they are, they like to have like mission-oriented programs, which was, one of them was like to have a flight instructor to teach people how to be bush pilots so they can go off into the wilds of, New Guinea or whatever, and teach people about being Christians and Adventists. So they had asked him to come and be a student, and then he could teach as well, teach the flight program. And he was just there for 2 quarters. So also he's not in that, not an Adventist anymore, as I am. Also have left that church and that teaching. So we'll fast forward now to after I stayed at Weimar College and graduated with a degree in education, and I ended up getting a job near where my parents lived. By that point, they'd settled down to Western Washington, and I got a job in Olympia and taught in that area for several years. 3 years I was there, but my 3rd year I ended up losing my job, and because the school didn't have enough students, and so then I just was substitute teaching. And toward the end of that year in March, I got a call out of the blue to move or to interview for a job in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. And I had just actually finished interviewing for a job in Michigan that I'd also been called out to interview. And I'd gone out there and I was just like, this is too far from my roots. Like, I just don't feel like I belong here at all. And so I want to stay in the Pacific Northwest. And I was really thinking, stay in Western Washington. So when I got the call to go out to Spokane, Eastern Washington, I was like, no, I don't think I'll even interview. I opened my mouth to say no, and yes popped out of my mouth just like that. And I was like, what? So I was like, okay, well, I've got the time to do it. I might as well just go interview. And I did, and I ended up getting the offer. And then I wasn't sure if I wanted it, but my dad said, you haven't gotten any other job offers, and this is, you've got this offer, and it's not that far away from Western Washington. We can visit you, you can visit us. And so I was like, okay, you're right. So I'll go. And the very first day that I was in town helping with school registration, I met my ex-husband who was registering his son for school. And because he's also a Seventh-day Adventist, going to that church, there was that connection there. And then I was immediately drawn to him. He's a very attractive man. And I was just really, really, drawn to him. In fact, I had quite the crush on him. And it turned out, I'll just make that long story short, that I found out later that our families knew each other. My dad and his dad, and actually both of our parents, mom and dad, went to school together at Walla Walla. And he has huge family. Both sides of his mom and dad have many brothers and sisters, and my parents know them all. In fact, his grandma was a church member. Grandma and grandpa were church members of my parents in Billings, Montana, where I'd grown up. So I knew them quite well. And so there were all these family connections, which again is interesting. Karmic partners do come to us through those channels. And so, met and ended up marrying Todd, and then lived here. So why that all comes back to Priest Lake. So I live in one of the most beautiful areas of the whole entire country. North Idaho it's like this where I live, only not quite as pretty, but pretty close. You've seen the other post. There's huge lakes. Lake Coeur d'Alene is very large. Lake Pend Oreille even bigger. There's a smaller, beautiful Lake Hayden Lake. It's all right where I live. And other tinier lakes as well. And yet I've always been like, if I ever have a lake home, I want a home on Priest Lake. I've just felt really drawn to this. Last summer, I got a job as a director of the Girl Scout camp on Lake Coeur d'Alene, and had a fantastic summer there. And there was one week during the summer where we take a group of older girls up to Priest Lake to go canoeing on actually like an extended trip. And if you put in at the north end of the lake, you can canoe through what they call the thoroughfare, which is just a waterway. It's about a half mile or maybe almost a mile long. Then you go to Upper Priest Lake, which is a much smaller lake. And then you can camp. There's several campsites up there. So when it was time to do that, to plan for that trip, I said, one of the staff need to go. And it was either me or my assistant director. And she was more interested in doing some of the other types of out trips. So I decided, I just love priests. So I was like, yeah, I really want to do priests. So I was the one that took the girls along with 2 counselors. We just had a small group of girls. The next, we camped up at the top end of the lake. And the next morning, I sat up in my tent, and all of a sudden the tent just started whipping around me, like spinning from severe vertigo. And I was just like, whoa, I'd never had anything like that in my life, ever. I laid back down for a while and got up slowly later and still felt a little bit dizzy, but I was better. And so was able to get, to canoe up with the girls up to the Upper Priest Lake just fine. We made camp up there, and then by the time we made camp up there, the vertigo started just getting worse and worse. And just to make a long story short, we were up there for 3 days while the girls kind of did out trips from that camp. And the whole time I was there, I was incapacitated. I couldn't even stand up. I would slowly in the morning make, adjustments to finally sit up straight And, you know, half the time I ended up just having to lay down again, like I was going to throw up, and just horrible. Everything was spinning. And even to get out of there, I was slightly better, just enough that we were able to prop me up in a very reclined position in the canoe. As we got through the thoroughfare and into the open water, just past the breakwater that is across the thoroughfare, from where the wind sometimes comes in, the wind was blowing really, really hard, and I ended up having to sit up and help paddle in order for us not to capsize, and, you know, somehow was able to do that. But then again, once we got back to the vehicles, I couldn't drive. So that was my experience there. And I later on was telling my friend, I have a very amazing spiritual mentor in Coeur d'Alene that I drop in on quite often in her little store, and I told her about it, and she said, Kimberly, vertigo is one of the signs of, you know, some really serious activation, you know, that has to do with you know, spiritual. It's a very spiritual symptom. And I was like, wow, that's really interesting. I hadn't thought about that. I never made the connection to Priest Lake, though, until this weekend. So on Friday, first of all, I want to just thank those of you who've had readings with me. You guys are the ones who made this possible. So my gift back to you is to, you know, bring you down here and show you this place, because I was really meant to come up here this weekend, and I'm meant to spend a lot of time up here in my future, because I, all of a sudden on Friday, I was just like, I just really need to feel like I want to go somewhere and have, you know, just want to go somewhere, have an adventure. I've just kind of been stuck in my life. I haven't had money for the last year and a half, and so I've really just, you know, been very happy in staying home and staying put. But I was just like, now I've got a little extra money, I'm going to rent a cabin up here. So that's what I did, and a very sudden, spur of the moment decision, and came up here. And as I was doing this, it started falling, other pieces started falling into place for me, and that this connection with this area, and it just clicked with me. I'm like, this is my prime grid point. This is it right here on Priest Lake. And in fact, I knew that I had my past life, actually my most recent past life before this incarnation here within the timeline. I was a shaman, a First People shaman here, and my daughter Avalee was with me. She was like she was my child in that life as well, kind of my apprentice as well. And I knew when I was doing the reading with the person who said this, instantly I just felt like I knew, like I could picture it too. I could picture that I was in this kind of a setting, that there would be lakes and there were loons, because I've always had this connection with the common loon. If you don't know what it is, look it up. It's a beautiful bird. It's a water bird, common just to the north, you know, northern part of the country. And in fact, they don't really have loons on Priest Lake anymore because there's too many boats here. They are very private birds. They like solitude, and they're still on Upper Priest Lake. So I'll get to that in a minute. And I just pictured, you know, this was the setting. I could see it as well, and yet I didn't make the connection then. When I started thinking about coming here, I remembered that, and then it just started clicking, like remembering that this was where I lived in this area, and I had a very, very happy, peaceful life. The First People cultures here are very, they're not warlike. They're very, you know, just living with the land and in harmony with it. And I came here to just kind of acclimate myself in a more peaceful way to this, you know, to the energies on Earth, to come into this lifetime, and also to recover from the prior life that I had before that, where I did meet my twin, and we had a very traumatic, very, very traumatic experience. So that, you know, I did have this connection too. And so also last summer when I was doing a vision board, I had a lot of different things that I was putting on it, and one of them, like I put very prominently, was Priest Lake. And when I was wanting to print pictures out for Priest Lake, I thought, well, I'm going to just look up for properties that are for sale and see if, you know, there's just ones that I think I like the look of, and I'll print out some pictures and put it on this board. And so I did, and the property that I found for sale is across the lake on the other side, where the sand is pure white. You see the sand here is more kind of a normal tan color, but on the other side of the lake, the sand is completely pure white because the quartz rock that's in the area is what the sand is made of. It's quartz. It's white quartz sand. And you look like you're in the Caribbean, only, you know, you've got cedars and hemlocks and, you know, and pine and fir all around. So the house that I looked at then and I'd put on my vision board is actually, I just picked up a magazine, and it's still for sale. When I was here, I started thinking about another passion that I've always had. I've always just wanted to have a retreat and wellness center. It's actually something my parents do. they have a beautiful 40-acre piece of property where my dad has built like 3 cabins, and then they hold these wellness retreats all summer long. They do several, and then they do some in the spring and fall as well. And my dad had gone on to get his master's in public health, and he teaches people about reversing diabetes and heart disease through a very healthful lifestyle. And then he teaches, like, the physics of it, or the physiology of it in your body. And I was raised actually vegan vegetarian, so that was my background. And now that I'm more on this spiritual path, I could really start envisioning what a kind of a center that I would like to have here. So next year, that's what I'm planning to do, is How We Fund It gets going, and How We Fund It will end up making quite a lot of money. And I want to start a nonprofit foundation and actually have a camp up here as a nonprofit, so we can keep have it really reasonably priced. And I will some point I'll start telling you guys some more of my ideas, because I really want to get lots of people involved in offering great kinds of, like, if you come up here to camp for a vacation for a week, that you would be able to have different classes that you could attend during the day, meditation, yoga, healing, art, all kinds of things. And just I want to keep it really reasonably priced, because it costs, like, up here it's usually about $2,000 to $3,000 a week to rent a cabin. It's crazy in the summer. It's not that expensive right now. So anyway, that I started realizing I have this connection to this place for those reasons. And then it occurred to me too, because of the vertigo that I had, that's why I'm connected to this place. So that's a little bit of a history about that. The reason I wanted to talk about the history also is the connection to the Adventist teaching, because I started having some thoughts, and things are coming into me. First of all, I will tell you that last week I sat down one evening and started channeling my twin's higher self, and the message that came through for me, I'm not to share it yet, but it was so intense for me that just such a sacred experience and sacred space as well. And the message itself and what it contains is so intense that I was just sobbing and almost feeling overwhelmed in the morning. When I was feeling overwhelmed in the morning when I woke up, though, I kind of looked at everything I'd written again, and I was like, okay, that's really not that different than what I already have known. It's just there was something about the way it came across with so much pathos and urgency. And it's big. I will be sharing you more about it, but in connection to that, I have some thoughts that were coming through to me yesterday and today. So I grew up in this religion where it's teaching that the second coming of Christ is just always around the corner. We spent our whole lives kind of actually afraid of it, because we're also taught that there's this terrible time of trouble that will happen first, and it's just going to be like this. It was just scary, because Adventists don't teach in hell. We actually don't believe that there's an everlasting hell, which is nice. But we kind of had our substitute fear factor, which was the time of trouble. Like, you better get your shit in gear, or lined up, so that you don't that you can stand firm in the time of trouble and not be lost. Like, it was the ultimate test. Like, your time of trouble would be, the thing that would really prove whether you were saved or not. Because if you weren't, if you didn't have enough strength inside of you to remain firm, then you would fall away when you were being persecuted. So we had that. But anyway, this time, second coming of Christ was always just in our, constant, all that we ever focused on, really. And I mean, I know it's biblical. As my beliefs have changed, I of course still believe in Christ as he's an ascended master with a very special message and purpose for this world. And I've also known that Mary Magdalene and Christ were were twin flames. And I was contemplating that this morning, and I started having some ideas come through. And one was this, that the way that their interaction, happened here on Earth, I'd kind of been puzzled by it before, because I was like, I don't know, like, if maybe they had kind of had a different kind of thing that they needed to show through their twin flame relationship or something, because, Christ is the masculine, and it looked like Mary was the, quote unquote runner. She was the one that kept, going back and forth. She was found in adultery 7 times, and, that at least by not straight out of the Bible, but other, other writings, indicate that Christ had a role in pulling her out of that every time. And we also see that from stories in the Old Testament about this one prophet that was told to, find this harlot and then keep, pulling her out of harlotry and marry her, and then she would leave him, which I think was probably, actually, come to think of it, another twin flame situation. So, but I was a little bit confused because I'm like thinking, I know that one of the things that came through to me more than ever, and I've always been recognizing this anyway, but more than ever from my channeling from my twin, is that this this role of the feminine in this, what we're doing here, it's the same for all feminine aspects, whether they're masculine or whether they have a male body or female body, gender wise. I realized as I was thinking this that Christ was actually, like, his core soul is feminine. And I don't know if anybody else has ever corroborated that, or if it will, argue against what other people have had if they've channeled, Jesus' higher self. I don't know. But he was the feminine. And the reason that he had to come in a masculine, that he chose to come in a masculine body, was because as the feminine aspect of the twins, they are the ones that are bringing the healing down, and they're the channel from the divine. They're the ones that bring it down into the earth. And at his time in Earth's history, he would have gotten no respect and no traction at all being in a feminine body. So he chose to have the, the feminine aspect of his half of their soul would be in the masculine body or male body, so that he, would have that at least, the authority or the respect that it was required for him to, have the mission at that time. The reason now in this day and age we have, things have really shifted so that the feminine is beginning to, the females are beginning to rise up against male oppression, and it always is, it is for the majority of the healing to come actually through the female aspect of the body, because it is the female aspect of the body that's been oppressed. As you know, we've all had lifetimes of either gender, but it's always been the female body or anybody who has a female tendency that has been oppressed. And so for the ultimate healing to take place, it does need to come, that the majority of that would actually come from the feminine being incarnated in a female body. I do think it's interesting that there still is a number of twin flame partners, some who are heterosexual, some who are, of course, who are homosexual or lesbian, that they're, again, we still have some, moving around of the gender just to help us know and understand that it is not just about the body gender, but it's about what's, the core of us, the core of our being. I am going, before I say any more, I'm going to tell you that there are twin flame teachers out there whose primary role right now, and maybe it will shift for them, I don't know, but their role is very much to teach us and show us about self-mastery and really coming into our power. That has to happen first. I without a shadow of a doubt, I'm going to be starting to teach things as I'm being shown that I will be, that is for the next step for people. There are many of you who are not ready for this yet. You can hear it and listen to it and kind of know that's where you're headed. But if you're not in complete self-mastery yet, then you've got to take the time to do that. That's what the time of separation between you and your twin is for the feminine to completely embody this amazing strength and self-mastery that has to take place before the twins unite. And I look back at Christ and I'm thinking that's what happened with him in the first 32 years of his life. That he, most likely he met Mary, much before that. She goes into prostitution 7 times and he drags her out. And we only really see the 7th time in the Bible after his 32 years. So I believe that, that his process of coming into self-mastery went through the very same process that we are. And I also realized as I was laying in bed thinking about these things this morning, I was like, we are the second coming of Christ. As I was saying before, I grew up with this, hearing it over and over again, the second coming of Christ. One of the things that we were always told is like, he's going to come in the clouds and every eye will see him. So even though, the earth is round, when he comes in, it's going to be like every eye. Well, I never could really understand that. And when we were also told how if somebody comes to you and says, oh, look, Christ is in this cave out here, and then, oh, well, no, look, Christ is over here, then don't believe them. Well, that's also true, because when the second coming of Christ takes place, the initial wave of it is in the twin flames, and we're everywhere. There's thousands and thousands of us who have, incarnated, who have separated from our twin souls so long ago, just like Jesus did. He was, our Pathfinder, or the original Pathfinder, as it were. And now we're coming here when the time is right, on Earth, when things had changed enough in the dynamics in order for it to finally be prepared for the feminine aspect to come mostly in female bodies, and in order, to affect this healing and this change. And that's another reason why it's not just one person. So if you hear somebody say, oh, Jesus has come, he's here on earth. Well, as Adventists, we're always like, oh, we know that it's not really Jesus, because the Bible tells us that every eye will behold him, and, he's going to come up in the sky. But I think it's because, we are being told, and, basically every eye they're everywhere. You'll see them everywhere. So that's something else that came through to me. In the embodying of Christ consciousness, that's also, that really is what, it's kind of the same thing also, it is the same thing as self-mastery. So I know that I've seen a significant shift in my own, just coming into the solidity of all of the development and the changes that have been happening for me over the last 2 years since I met my twin. And I've also seen it in a lot of the people that I'm reading for. I see the varying degrees. I can see where some people are still at where I was, 6 months ago or a year ago. And then other people are kind of like, I can tell, like they're really there. Or if not, you're so close. And I just want to let you know that verge of, switching into complete embodying of the Christ consciousness, it really happens when you begin ministry. And again, another parallel to Christ, that his ministry began at age 32. And I feel like up until that point, he was in this whole struggle with Mary, and all this stuff was going on. And he'd been, of course, also being taught by great teachers. We've heard stories about him having, gone into Egypt to do teaching and training and whatnot. But in any case, his ministry actually was, the final just coalescing of who he was in his Christ consciousness. And of course, I do know that he was born on earth without any prior karma, so it was, in a sense, gave him that edge, which was good, because he didn't come in here for himself to take on all of that clearing. It was like he came on here to show us how to do it, and he had to, really protect within himself that ability not to be so sucked into earth, into the negative energy of earth, so that he was able to, in spite of the fact that he had really no other support, like we have now. We're all coming in, and there's been a lot of advancements spiritually, and then we're all here together doing this, so that it makes it more possible. And we also see that he, the stories of when he ends up finally doing the final pull of Mary out of prostitution was when he was into his ministry as well. So there's a lot of parallels there. I'm going to wrap this little segment up right now, because the next one, I'm not sure if I'll do it now or if it's going to be a little bit later. I just wanted to record something for you guys up here. As you can see, it's so lovely, and kind of put the seeds out there about this Christ consciousness and the place that we will be completely and fully embodying when it's time for the union to take place. That's the second part, is when I'm going to be talking about what it is and how it is that we do that, because I'm starting to get some very key, important information about what it is and what we will have happen in order for us to bring together with union with our twins. And I know that that's the biggest thing on everybody's mind right now. I just want to reiterate again, though, that the full embodying of your own self-mastery and into Christ consciousness has to come first, or you won't be able to be with your twin. So that is why your focus right now needs to be on yourself and your mission. And because mission actually will just propel you. It's like the jetpack of getting into Christ consciousness, because that's what we came to do. So much love to you all from beautiful Priest Lake, North Idaho, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.